Seth, again, back on stream, facing top player Jackson Smylie. So this should be a really good game.
Seth knows the entire dictionary with a very high degree of accuracy, but so does Jackson. Jackson has really worked on that word knowledge to where it is absolutely not a weakness in any way, shape, or form.
I think we're getting ready to get started here. Let's go ahead and get this rolling.
Yep, Seth going first this time. As we see Seth play Retax, by far his highest scoring play. I wonder if there's any merit to playing just EAUX here, but I definitely like Retax for Seth.
Havingly, that's not a word, is it?
Oh, man, you can tell that Jackson is evaluating that. It's not a valid word. Playing that would almost certainly Seth challenge that word again for the reasons we described. He really has very good dictionary command. I don't think Jackson is going to play having.
I was going to say he's taking too long, and I think as Jonathan Lind pointed out in the chat, with that kind of play, it's pretty easy to see with such a clunky rack. And if you're Jackson, if you're going to phone it, you want to do it quickly, because if you take a long time, that indicates to your opponent that you're probably unsure of it, because otherwise, why would you take 2 minutes and go for 84 points with a really ugly rack? So I think that was a smart play by Jackson if he just taking 48 for retaxing.
The funny thing is, playing retaxing in that spot blocked Seth from playing retaxing. He has ing on his rack as well. Cool. So I think Seth was probably like, ooh, look, I've just drawn ing, right? Now I can get this extension. And then Jackson playing the very same extension that he potentially hoped to play. And that does leave Seth with a much more difficult decision in terms of he's not likely to have a play that both scores any kind of good number of points and keeps a good leave here.
Seth has gun lined up now, which goes under the X. It's not bad. The leave is a little bit val heavy for my liking, but it does score pretty well. And he does have the R to work with, so it's not terrible.
Wow. Okay. So what's happened here is gun looks really good, except for maybe a slight imbalance, but Seth's drawn consonants that shockingly, normally that draw would not be that good, Mac, but you see what he's drawn.
Yeah. No, I think what we both realized I think we both said wow at the same instance there. And the Seth has drawn pedicab on his rack, which is not like an obscure word per se. I believe it's like a bicycle taxi, but it's just not an easy word to see. But Seth, as we saw it immediately, and he's re-alphabetized his tiles, but we know he sees it. And if you're Jackson here, kind of a clunky rack. He has Faye lined up, which I guess he might
probably
play with
here
or above the R and the E. I'm not sure, but probably in that spot looks a little bit stronger, and that would block pedicab, I believe. So of course Jackson does not know that.
Yeah, pedicab is going to fit right here with AR and B, and if Jackson just plays pretty much anything in this spot, that is going to end the dream. And that is really, it's just so painful, Mac, when you have such a nice 7-letter bingo on your rack. There's a spot for it, only one spot for it, and then you see it evaporate before your very eyes.
Interesting. He switched to Fe, which I like, keeping VIYL instead of VIHL. Normally, the H is a little bit better than the Y, but HV is pretty clunky together. And also with an L and IL on his rack, ILY is a pretty good group of letters together for synergy. So again, this is why Jackson is so good. He thinks beyond the basics, right? Of okay, an H is better than a Y, therefore I should play Fe. Or Faye, rather, and kind of goes to the next step of looking at overall synergy.
Yeah, it hurts, but you got to shake it off. If you're Seth, you have to realize that, spot was always relatively likely. So pedicab right here. How was Jackson?
Pre-taxing is not good, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, I think pre-tax is just an adjective. So, good point, though. So that is definitely something he's going to be considering.
Yeah, and I wonder if he's thinking about it.
Yeah, very interesting point. That is, oh man, that's tantalizing. So that's a great point. I totally could imagine him now agonizing. He had this place to play pedicab, which was not controversial in any way. He knows that's valid. Now he's left with this decision. Pre-tax is a valid word, but it happens to only be an
He was
adjective.
just thinking about it, Will. He picked
He's
up
thinking about
PETs.
it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so painful. But
Yeah,
I can easily see him go for it,
oh, he's
and
doing
he
it, Will. He's
does.
doing it. Oh boy.
He does.
Oh boy. I
Oh,
feel like Jackson's going
huge.
to challenge this off, but
I agree, but this
yeah,
definitely puts him to the test in a big
yeah,
way.
it'll
This
be
is going to be a
interesting.
tough one.
Insta challenge.
Jackson, insta challenge, not even a moment. So you know what this tells me? This tells me that Jackson has probably already thought this over of what am I going to do if a P comes up? Like there was
Yeah.
no well, he's putting pedicab just to be careful, and you can see pre-taxing. You get the wow, I love the word judge.me, and also the producer Josh Greenway of Let's Play Scrabble, the beautiful challenge screen. I just love that so much. Mac, I think that was a reasonable gamble for Seth to take, but I'm really impressed by that fast challenge. I'm even more impressed by this play of Viney for Jackson. We know based on how he had his tiles set up that he actually saw that he had a really cool play of buy vinyl through the IN on the board. He had his tiles set up in that way, and that would have created a really nice hook for his S. But now he knows what Seth has. He's just seen all of Seth's tiles, and buy vinyl in this spot would have allowed Seth to play very nice high scoring plays like biped in this spot that score very well. After Viney, there's very little going on for Seth on this board. He can hardly do anything in response. And Jackson, not only does he set up his L to play something with vinyl, he draws just a very nice, flexible combination of letters, and he still has an S hook here with Hags. So just a great adjustment there by Jackson, who I really think was going to play by vinyl and then switched over to this one, Mac, after seeing Seth's letters.
I think Jackson handled it perfectly there, and he is going to be able to bingo back with bistable is a word, I believe, and that's going to play
it
through
is.
the B.
It's going to be an absolute hammer of a play. Yeah, no question.
I think he actually anticipated that because he had that lined up before biped came down. I think Jackson even figured that Seth was probably going to play biped and was just waiting for that, which is incredible.
That's amazing. Yeah, so biped in the spot where Seth played it scored 26. It would have scored 39 had Jackson gone through and played his what I think he was getting set to play of by vinyl. Would have scored 13 more points in that spot. So you can just see how much better on the exchange between the one turn and the next for Jackson. It's just worked out so unbelievably well for him, and the momentum has totally swung in Jackson's favor.
Big going here, though, so this is not over.
No, by no means is it over. Just want to give Jackson his props for that very, very impressive sequence there. So yeah, it is back to Seth. He's drawn a blank, and no question in my mind that he's going to play a bingo. I guess a big question is, what does he think about this word of bistable? Does he think of it as an adjective, or does he think of it as a noun? That's kind of important if he's willing to go for it. It actually is defined. You see it there underneath the board as an adjective and a noun. So it can take an S hook. And if he's confident enough in doing that, he can play crustal there for 80 points. What would you do here, Mac? Would you feel confident in that S hook? Maybe you already lost a challenge in this game. You're feeling a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah, I happen to know for sure that is valid. That being said, if I weren't sure, I like Seth's decision here. You really don't want to lose another turn. And he's, I think, only giving up about 2 points by doing this. So it's really not that big a sacrifice. Now, the one drawback to his play is it definitely keeps the board a bit more restricted. If he had played crustal and bistables, he would have created not only a line for sevens under the A and the L, but also created several more lines for eights through the C and the R. So his play is inferior positionally, but it's very, very tough to be sure of that word. Eights to make nines are a tricky bunch, and unfortunately for Seth, Jackson is about to score 78 more points here, Will.
All he has to do is open up his mind, Jackson, that is, to the possibility that he needs to use all of his consonants here. And if he does, you're going to see Matza be played, as you allude to, Mac, right here, 78 pointer on offer for Jackson. I do think he's going to see it, but I would just add it's not a gimme in the way that it would be if it was just, there we go. Okay. You can see pretty much, I'm pretty sure the light bulb just went off that, oh yeah, I have this word. There's no reason to wait.
What I don't love from Seth's perspective in general here is that he's down over 100 points. And like I was saying with Crustle, this is not a great board for him for bingoing, especially after Dimwit. I mean, if Jackson blocks the M, there's the G on the right, but he's starting to run out of real estate. The board is feeling fairly compressed towards the middle right now. Another option, and again, it would rely on the buy stables hook, is he could play Wimps and buy stables, which scores a lot more and is probably worth it, especially given the size of his deficit, if he is confident it's a word.
Yeah, that's the main question. Is he thinking about that S hook as in play for him here? All right. This is probably a move that if Seth's at all uncertain of buy stable taking an S, this is a must as a move. It could also be worth doing regardless, just because you really do set up your S hook in a dangerous way that could be difficult for Jackson to deal with if he has pretty much exactly the type of rack that he does have. Jackson's going to be doing his best to overlap this spot, and he'll probably have some play or other that accomplishes that. But it's going to be tricky to shut it down altogether.
Jackson needs to be really careful here, too, about how he blocks, because this is a mistake I've seen a lot, guys. If, say, Jackson plays our, O-U-R, next to O-M and up, he actually isn't blocking, because Seth could potentially now not only bingo, but actually triple. There are a lot of words that have RS there, and that becomes a long-term liability for Jackson. So he probably should try to block this, but he just needs to be very, very careful about how he goes about doing that.
That's definitely the red alert spot, and Jackson's going to make as good of a block as he can.
Jackson is going to go with out. He was clearly waffling for a while, and Jackson is normally a pretty fast player. Jackson spent, I think, about 5 minutes on this turn, which is a lot for him, but I think it was warranted. It's a really tough turn, and it has a lot of implications, as we're going to see, for the rest of the game.
So you can see after that bingo, Seth is hot on Jackson's heels in the scoreboard. Wow. Okay. Wow. 2 brutal draws.
Interesting. Both so I take back what I said before about Cott being obvious. Jackson is strongly considering here playing between Dowdius and by stable, something like Re or Row, with the idea of scoring pretty well and blocking a little bit on top while also saving Cott for next turn, hoping that Seth doesn't block. It's an interesting thing to consider. Jackson, I think, makes the right call here ultimately in just shedding the Q, and you still do block the bottom a little bit. The D in the third spot is not all that scary. So yeah, I think Jackson was definitely correct to consider playing up there, but I do agree with his call. And yeah, now we're going to have to see how Seth handles this vowelless rack. Very bad timing for this kind of draw.
Seth, he's got a spot or two on this board. The one that really jumps out is this O. So with all those consonants, the nice saving grace of all the consonants on Seth's rack is he has the CK, CH. He has very synergistic combinations of consonants that will allow him to dump a bunch of them at once. I think his best play here is probably Gaunch through that O. Bit of an obscure word, but it would hit the H in this really good spot. Let's see if he ends up playing it. He does. That's going to be a nice job by him. I like it, Mac.
Now Jackson probably going to be looking at something like Euro on top. I'm guessing a fairly low scoring play, but he's got to rid himself of some of these E's.
Maybe he would be tempted to play just NEE right here. It scores well. The leave is decent. It looks like he's set aside those tiles on his rack right here. So maybe he'll do that and think that the other 5 tiles on his rack, maybe he'll draw a 7-letter word that he could play up here. Maybe he'll draw an 8 through the G. There's a couple things that can happen, but he does play that. I would have been sorely tempted to play Euro just to go a little bit harder to get the blank, but I don't really find too much fault with this one, Mac.
So yeah, now we'll see what Seth is going to do. He could play something like Silky on top if he just wants to score, but that would require getting rid of his S.
Yeah, he does have a couple nice other alternative options, like Raya down in the lower left corner scores decently well. It keeps the S. It does only use 2 tiles. If you really are wanting to burn through tiles and try to get that blank, you could play Silky up here, and that accomplishes that objective much more so. Plenty of other options. Risky right here is another good score. So there's a bunch of options that score well for Seth, and they're all going to get him pretty close on the scoreboard to Jackson. So this game knotted up in a hurry. Remember, after bye stable, Jackson was up huge, but Seth's done very well to work past that pre-taxing play with Pedicab and get right back into this thing. And we do see Oi for Seth. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think this is one of those turns where there were probably 4 or 5 plays. I think we're all close and reasonable. And it's, very hard to know, like, how do you weigh these different factors? Like, it's good to consider all these factors, but sometimes it's hard to know which ones to prioritize. I think Oi, Rhea, Silky, Oik, I think was not unreasonable either, like you said. I think I'm definitely fine with Seth's play here. He still holds the S to go above the H, and has a good chance of maybe even drawing something like Silkier next turn or something like that. So, now we'll have to see how Jackson wants to play this. He did draw the F, which is not a bad tile, honestly, relative to some of the tiles in the pool.
A 4 in this spot does a lot of good things. There aren't really any whammy consonants that you would see after an E in this spot. It's not really possible to hammer this spot. You draw 5 tiles towards the blank. I actually really like this play for Jackson a whole lot here, Mac.
Seth is going to capitalize, I imagine, with Drink pretty quickly there, which looks like a great play for him to clear out this rack, which he, I'm sure, was not too happy to draw after his play of Oi pulling 2 consonants out of that bag. But yeah, you got to be pretty happy to see a 4 come down if you're Seth. Great ballot play, keeps LS, drawing into a Val heavy pull with a blank unseen. Seth is down a little bit, but he's not going to be down much after Drink, and this is absolutely still anyone's game.
First of all, we're going to have to watch with bated breath as Seth draws these 5 tiles. He could easily pick that valuable blank right now. And if he does, the odds of him picking great tiles to go with it are incredibly good. There's just very few whammy tiles. There's very few, bad combos that he can draw if he does pick that second blank here. So Jackson is going to have to hope against hope that it's still lurking in there when it comes time for him to go next into the bag. And there we go. Ooh. Wow. So that's about as bad of a draw as you could see for Seth, unless he has some great play that I'm not seeing. He drew the V. That's not a good bingo tile. It's not going to score very well here. And the blank is still in there, lurking potentially for Jackson if he plays Rioja, Mac.
Yeah, definitely, like you said, not at all what you want to see if you're Seth. But from obviously Jackson's perspective, he does not know what Seth has. And this is a pretty terrifying pool to be against with a lead. And I think I like Jackson's play here. The other consideration which he had on his rack was Zhao through the I and Drink, which scores about the same, 1 point less. It keeps an extra vowel, which is definitely not what he wants, given there's still plenty in the pool. And Rioja does open some floaters on the bottom, but it's not that easy to start with an A, which Seth would need to do to score a lot. And Jackson does go up about 45 here, so he could potentially be in a position to outrun Seth if he does bingo for not a lot. So I think Jackson needs to not be too scared. And he does draw the blank, but he draws more vowels to go with it. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, insane. So now, given Jackson's really poor vowel draw, it feels like if Seth makes a good enough balancing play, getting rid of the V, he might actually be roughly even odds with Jackson to get the first bingo down.
I mean, Seth needs to be aggressive here. He can't be – if you're Seth, you have to bingo to win this game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And you can't be afraid of Jackson bingoing, because if Jackson bingos, you're going to lose anyway. So you have to play hoping that Jackson doesn't bingo. And that is very possible, guys, because look at the pool. 10 vowels and 6 consonants. Even though there's all those good tiles, it's not that likely. And actually, there's a better variant of viol with an A. Morris points out he should absolutely play viol with an O, VIOL, to set up his A as well with only. Yeah, that's a great play here.
Yep. Setting up the A for a little extra flexibility. You could extend it with an S. You could extend it. Ooh, this looks like
That's still fine, though, honestly. I mean, ALST, he still sets up his S. I think it's slightly worse, but it's still a very solid play.
It's still solid, but you just wonder, what if he draws a 7-letter word with, an A in just the wrong spot that it might have played there. So I think a slight improvement, but I agree. These are very close plays for sure. This game is coming down to the wire.
He's got isolates through the O in Rioja. Does he have anything else?
Oh, there we go. So this is fascinating because so much hinges on what Jackson plays. I think he's going to know full well that he really needs to hold on to that N and hope that he draws a couple of consonants here. But even if Seth gets isolates down, Jackson will easily have plenty of opportunity to respond with a bingo that's going to clinch him the game, even after Seth bingos. So just because Seth is sitting on isolates, yes, that is definitely very good for him. It is far from an ironclad win, even if he plays it.
I think Jackson should focus more on the counter bingo, like you said, because absolutely he's up enough that if they trade bingos, Jackson, especially bingoing out, will win this game every time. Another thing to mention, every tile left is worth 1 point. So it is going to come down to, Seth needs to bingo and hope Jackson doesn't bingo to win. If they bingo the same amount, Jackson's going to win. That's what this game is going to come down to. So Jackson could try to play on the bottom with G or Je. But again, the problem then is if Seth bingos elsewhere, Jackson is going to have fewer lines to bingo back. So I think if I were Jackson, he's looking at emu through the M, which I really like, getting rid of 3 of his vowels and just leaving everything open. You've got the blank. If Seth bingos, you've got a bunch of lines to bingo back, and I think this is the right call.
Yeah, really fascinating. Emu in that spot, scoring only 6, but almost with any kind of flexible draw. From Jackson's POV, he would love to draw an S because that would open up this spot on the board. But even without it, isolates does not go far enough. This G is going to be very, very flexible for Jackson to use. And he'll just have neologic. Yeah, neologic. Yeah. That's going to do it. So leaving that G open, and he's drawn the I. That's easily enough. Let me get these scores in quickly.
He's got it. Yep.
Yeah, he sees it.
And yeah, we know he sees it. We know he's going to play it if he can't find anything else. And he's not going to find anything else because there is nothing there. So this is going to come down, but totally for Jackson. If has any doubt, he has 3 minutes. There is no reason not to take it. And all you need to do is find any bingo that you're sure of and play it. So yeah, it turns out there's nothing else there, and he's gonna bingo out and win this game.
As Jackson does lay his winning bingo down here, and Seth, just a deep breath. He'll challenge it, of course, but this is the only winning play available here for Jackson Smylie, and a pretty epic win, Mack, in the process here.
Yeah, what a game. There was just so much back and forth in this game,